Sarah Bennett stood before the gleaming entrance of the Grand Plaza Hotel, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The morning sun reflected off the building's towering glass facade, creating a dazzling display that seemed to mirror her own bright hopes for the future. At 26, she had finally landed her dream position as the head receptionist at one of Manhattan's most prestigious hotels. Adjusting her perfectly pressed uniform and checking her appearance one last time in the reflective surface of the revolving door, Sarah took a deep breath. This wasn't just any job. It was her chance to prove herself in the competitive world of luxury hospitality. After years of working at smaller hotels and completing an advanced hospitality management program, she had beaten out dozens of other candidates for this coveted position. The lobby was a masterpiece of modern luxury, with soaring ceilings, marble floors, and crystal chandeliers that cast prismatic patterns across the space. The air carried the subtle fragrance of fresh flowers, arranged in stunning displays that were changed daily by the hotel's dedicated florist. Every detail was meticulously curated to create an atmosphere of sophistication and exclusivity. "Good morning, Sarah," Victoria Chen, the hotel manager, greeted her with a warm smile. "Ready for your first day as our head receptionist?" Victoria was known throughout the industry for her impeccable standards and ability to spot promising talent. Her approval had been crucial in Sarah's hiring. "Absolutely, Ms. Chen," Sarah replied, straightening her shoulders. "I've studied all the protocols and guest profiles. I won't let you down." "I know you won't," Victoria said, leading her to the front desk. "Remember, the Grand Plaza isn't just a hotel, it's an institution. Our guests expect nothing but the finest service, and that starts right here with you." Sarah nodded, taking her position behind the elegant marble counter. The computer system came to life under her fingers as she logged in, revealing the day's guest list. The names read like a who's who of international business and entertainment, CEOs, diplomats, and celebrities who chose the Grand Plaza for its discretion and unparalleled service. As the morning progressed, Sarah handled each check-in with precision and grace. Her attention to detail and warm professionalism earned approving nods from Victoria, who observed from a distance. Every interaction reinforced Sarah's confidence that she belonged here, that this was her chance to shine in the world of luxury hospitality. "You're doing wonderfully," Jessica, one of the senior receptionists, whispered during a quiet moment. "But wait until you meet some of our more interesting guests. That's when the real challenge begins." Sarah smiled, assured in her ability to handle any situation. After all, she had trained for years for this very position. Her education and experience had prepared her for the most demanding guests, or so she thought. What she didn't realize was that her greatest test would come not from an obviously important visitor, but from someone who appeared to be quite the opposite. The morning rush had subsided when the lobby doors opened, admitting a gentle breeze and a single guest who would unknowingly change the course of Sarah's career. The man who entered wore simple sandals, light cotton pants, and a traditional keffiyeh draped casually over a plain white shirt. He carried no luggage and walked with an unhurried grace that seemed at odds with the usual bustling energy of the hotel. Sarah's carefully maintained professional smile faltered slightly as she watched him approach the desk. In her mind, shaped by years of working in luxury establishments, this man's casual attire and solitary presence didn't align with the Grand Plaza's usual clientele. She had been trained to recognize and cater to wealth and importance, and in her judgment, this visitor seemed to have wandered into the wrong establishment. As he reached the desk, Sarah's voice took on a subtle tone of condescension that would have horrified her had she recognized it. "Good morning, sir. May I help you?" The words were correct, but the delivery carried an unmistakable suggestion that perhaps he might be more comfortable elsewhere. The man's dark eyes met hers with a gentle intensity that she failed to properly register. "Yes, I believe you can," he replied in perfect English, his voice carrying a slight accent that Sarah couldn't quite place. "I'm here to check in." Sarah's fingers hovered over her keyboard, her professional mask barely concealing her skepticism. In that moment, she made a decision that would set in motion events she could never have anticipated. Instead of immediately checking the reservation system, she decided to guide this apparently lost visitor toward what she considered a more suitable alternative. "Sir," Sarah began, her voice taking on what she considered a helpful tone, "the Grand Plaza is a luxury establishment, and our rooms start at—" She paused deliberately, emphasizing the price point. $1,200 per night. Perhaps I could recommend some other hotels in the area that might better suit your needs." The man's expression remained unchanged, but something flickered in his eyes, not anger or indignation, but something deeper, more contemplative. "I'm aware of the rates," he replied calmly. "My name is Khalid. I believe you'll find a reservation." Sarah's fingers moved reluctantly across the keyboard, certain she was simply humoring someone who would soon need to be politely but firmly directed elsewhere. Her eyes widened slightly as a reservation actually appeared on her screen. But rather than correcting her assumption, this only reinforced her prejudice. Surely there must be some mistake. "I see a reservation under that name, sir, but I'm afraid I'll need to verify some additional information." Her tone remained professional but carried an undercurrent of doubt. "We have very strict security protocols, you understand." Victoria, Chen, who had been observing the interaction from across the lobby, approached swiftly, her expression shifting from concern to recognition as she caught sight of the guest. "Mr. Al-Rashid," she exclaimed, her voice carrying a warmth and respect that made Sarah freeze. "Welcome back to the Grand Plaza. I trust your flight from Dubai was comfortable?" Sarah felt the blood drain from her face as realization crashed over her. Khalid Al-Rashid. The name suddenly connected in her mind with the business news she'd been reading just last week. The billionaire entrepreneur who had been quietly acquiring luxury properties across 3 continents. The philanthropist whose educational initiatives had transformed thousands of lives. The man who, according to the memo she had received but clearly failed to properly review, had recently acquired the Grand Plaza itself. "Victoria, always a pleasure," Khalid responded warmly, offering a genuine smile. "The flight was excellent." "Thank you." His eyes moved briefly to Sarah, who felt as though the marble floor beneath her feet might swallow her whole. "Sarah," Victoria said, her voice carrying a note of controlled tension, "Mr. Al-Rashid is our new owner. Perhaps you'd like to check him in properly now." The next few minutes passed in a blur of mortification as Sarah processed Khalid's check-in with trembling hands. Her earlier condescension felt like a weight pressing down on her shoulders, each casual keystroke a reminder of her monumental error in judgment. Khalid remained gracious throughout the process, his demeanor unchanged despite her earlier treatment. As a bell attendant appeared to escort Khalid to his suite, Victoria turned to Sarah with an expression that mixed disappointment with concern. "My office, please, immediately." The walk to Victoria's office felt like the longest journey of Sarah's life. Her mind raced through possible scenarios, all ending with her immediate dismissal. How could she have been so foolish, so prejudiced? Everything she had worked for, every dream she had cultivated, seemed to crumble with each step. Victoria's office, with its panoramic views of the city, had earlier that morning represented the pinnacle of Sarah's professional aspirations. Now it felt like the setting for her career's end. She stood before Victoria's desk, hands clasped, tightly together, waiting for the inevitable. "Sit down, Sarah," Victoria said, her voice carefully neutral. "Do you understand the magnitude of what just happened?" "Yes, Miss Chen," Sarah replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I made an unforgivable mistake. I let superficial judgments cloud my professional conduct. I violated everything the Grand Plaza stands for." Victoria leaned back in her chair, studying Sarah carefully. "Mr. Al-Rashid is not just our owner, Sarah. He's one of the most respected figures in international hospitality. His philosophy of service and respect has transformed every property he's acquired. And you just gave him a first-hand demonstration of exactly what he works to eliminate from the industry." Sarah felt tears threatening to form but forced them back. She would at least maintain her composure in this final professional moment. "I understand if you need my resignation immediately," she offered, her voice steadier than she felt. Before Victoria could respond, there was a gentle knock at the office door. Both women turned to see Khalid Al-Rashid standing in the doorway, his presence somehow both commanding and humble simultaneously. "May I join this conversation?" he asked, though it wasn't really a question. Victoria immediately stood as Khalid entered the office, but he gestured for both women to remain seated as he took a chair beside Sarah. The silence in the room felt heavy with anticipation, broken only by the distant hum of the city below. "Miss Bennett," Khalid began, his voice carrying the same gentleness it had shown at the front desk, "do you know why I choose to dress this way when I travel?" He adjusted his keffiyeh slightly, the movement deliberate and proud. Sarah struggled to find her voice. "No, sir, I don't. These clothes represent who I am, my heritage, my culture. They're also comfortable for long flights," he added with a slight smile. "But more importantly, they help me understand the true character of the places and people I encounter." He leaned forward slightly, his expression thoughtful. "You see, luxury isn't about designer labels or expensive suits. True luxury is about how we make people feel. Every person who walks through those doors deserves to feel valued, respected, and welcomed. Not because of what they're wearing or how they look, but simply because they are human beings worthy of dignity." Sarah felt tears threatening again, but for a different reason now. The kindness in his voice was somehow harder to bear than anger would have been. "I could easily have arrived in an expensive suit, surrounded by an entourage," Khalid continued. "Many expect that of someone in my position. But then how would I know if my hotels truly embrace the values I believe in? How would I identify where change is needed?" Victoria watched the interaction with increasing interest, her earlier tension giving way to curiosity about where this conversation might lead. "Mr. Al-Rashid, I am deeply sorry," Sarah managed to say. "My behavior was inexcusable. I allowed prejudice and assumptions to override everything I should stand for as a hospitality professional." Khalid nodded slowly. "Your apology is accepted, Ms. Bennett. But apologies alone don't create change. Actions do." He paused, studying her face carefully. "Which is why I have a proposal for you." Sarah looked up, confusion mixing with the remnants of her shame. Victoria leaned forward slightly, equally intrigued. "Instead of ending your career here, I want you to transform it and help transform this hotel in the process," Khalid explained. "I'm giving you the opportunity to create and lead a comprehensive training program for all our staff. The focus will be on authentic hospitality, cultural sensitivity, and the elimination of unconscious bias." Sarah blinked in surprise, certain she had misheard. "You want me to lead a training program? After what I just did?" "Precisely because of what you just did," Khalid responded. "Who better to teach about the dangers of prejudice than someone who has faced their own biases head-on? Your experience today could become a powerful teaching tool if you're willing to be vulnerable enough to share it." Victoria's expression shifted from surprise to thoughtful consideration. "Mr. Al-Rashid, that's actually brilliant. Sarah's background in hospitality management, combined with this personal experience, would make her uniquely qualified to drive real change," Khalid completed the thought. "But it won't be easy. You'll need to develop the entire curriculum, coordinate with department heads, and face skepticism from some who might resist change. You'll also need to prove the program's effectiveness through measurable improvements in guest satisfaction and employee performance." Sarah's mind raced. With the implications. This was simultaneously a second chance and an enormous challenge. The opportunity to turn her mistake into something meaningful was tempting, but the responsibility was daunting. "You don't need to decide immediately," Khalid added, noting her overwhelmed expression. "Take 24 hours to consider it. But know this, I'm not offering this opportunity out of mere kindness. I believe that someone who can acknowledge their mistakes and learn from them has the potential to be an exceptional leader." He stood, adjusting his simple clothes with natural dignity. "In my experience, Ms. Bennett, our greatest growth often comes from our most humbling moments. The question is whether we have the courage to embrace those opportunities for transformation." As Khalid headed toward the door, he turned back briefly. "Oh, and Victoria, please ensure Ms. Bennett has access to all the resources she'll need. If she accepts this challenge, I expect regular updates on the program's development." After he left, Sarah and Victoria sat in stunned silence for several moments. Finally, Victoria spoke. her voice carrying a mix of amazement and respect. "In 15 years of luxury hospitality, I've never seen anything quite like this." He took what could have been a terrible situation and turned it into an opportunity for systemic change. Sarah looked down at her hands, still trembling slightly. "Do you think I can do it?" she asked quietly. Victoria's response was measured but encouraging. "I think you're being offered a chance that few people get, to turn a mistake into a mission. The real question is, are you brave enough to take it?" Sarah spent the next 24 hours in a state of intense self-reflection. Her small apartment, usually a haven of peace after long days at work, felt charged with the weight of the decision before her. She had laid out her laptop, notebooks, and industry magazines across her dining table, attempting to organize her thoughts. The sun was setting over the city skyline when her phone buzzed with a text from Jessica, the senior receptionist who had welcomed her just that morning. A morning that now felt like a lifetime ago. "Heard what happened. Also heard about the opportunity. Don't let fear stop you from something amazing. Coffee tomorrow before your decision?" Sarah smiled at the unexpected support and agreed to meet. The next morning, in a quiet cafe 2 blocks from the Grand Plaza, Jessica's perspective helped bring clarity to Sarah's swirling thoughts. "You know what makes this perfect?" Jessica said, stirring her cappuccino thoughtfully. "You're not just qualified on paper. You've lived through exactly what needs to change. That's experience you can't get from any training manual." Sarah traced the rim of her coffee cup. "But will anyone take me seriously? After yesterday?" "They'll take you seriously precisely because of yesterday," Jessica countered. "Look, I've been at the Grand Plaza for 8 years. You're not the first person to make assumptions about a guest, just the first to get such a unique chance to fix the systemic problem." As they talked, Sarah pulled out her notebook, already filled with ideas she'd jotted down during her sleepless night. Jessica leaned forward, intrigued by the detailed notes. "You've already started planning, haven't you?" she asked with a knowing smile. Sarah nodded, slightly embarrassed. "I couldn't help it. I started thinking about interactive workshops, role-playing scenarios, cultural awareness sessions. Even if I don't take the position, maybe these ideas could help someone else." "And that right there is exactly why you should take it," Jessica declared. "You're already thinking about how to help others learn from your experience." Returning to her apartment to prepare for her meeting with Khalid, Sarah found herself standing before her mirror, much as she had before her first day at the hotel. But this time she wasn't checking her appearance, she was practicing what she would say. "Mr. Al-Rashid," she rehearsed, "I accept your offer, and here's why. What happened yesterday wasn't just about me. It exposed a broader issue in our industry, one that needs to be addressed systematically and thoughtfully." The words felt right, they felt true. With renewed purpose, Sarah gathered her materials and headed to the Grand Plaza. The same gleaming entrance that had filled her with excitement 2 days ago now represented something different. Not just a workplace, but a place of transformation. Victoria met her in the lobby, her expression warm but professional. "He's waiting in the executive conference room," she said, leading the way. "Whatever you decide, Sarah, know that your honesty and willingness to learn have already impressed a lot of people here." The conference room offered a stunning view of Central Park, its floor-to-ceiling windows flooding the space with morning light. Khalid sat at the long table, reviewing documents, still dressed in his traditional clothing. He looked up as Sarah entered, and she noticed again the gentle intelligence in his eyes that she had failed to appreciate during their first encounter. "Ms. Bennett," he greeted her, gesturing to a chair, "I trust you've given my proposal careful consideration." Sarah took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and placed her notebook on the table. "Yes, sir, I have. And before I give you my decision, I'd like to share some initial thoughts about what this program could be." Khalid's eyebrows raised slightly in interest as Sarah opened her notebook. For the next 15 minutes, she outlined her preliminary vision. A comprehensive program that would combine theoretical learning with practical experience, personal storytelling with professional development, and cultural awareness with concrete customer service skills. Most importantly, she concluded, I believe this program should not just be about avoiding mistakes like mine. It should be about creating a genuine culture of inclusion and respect that becomes part of the Grand Plaza's identity. Khalid listened intently, his expression thoughtful. When she finished, he smiled warmly. I notice you're presenting this as if you've already accepted the position. Sarah straightened in her chair, meeting his gaze directly. Because I have, sir. That is, if you'll still have me. I want to turn my mistake into something meaningful, not just for myself but for everyone who walks through those doors. The following weeks transformed Sarah's world entirely. Her new office, a converted meeting room on the mezzanine level of the Grand Plaza, became command central for what she now called the Dignity Initiative. The walls were covered with charts, cultural sensitivity guidelines, and guest satisfaction metrics. Her laptop contained dozens of drafts of training, modules, each carefully crafted to address different aspects of hospitality and human interaction. However, not everyone shared her enthusiasm for change. During her first staff meeting to introduce the program, Sarah faced the skepticism she had been dreading. So, let me get this straight, Marcus Reynolds, a veteran concierge, spoke up from the back of the room. You're going to teach us how to do our jobs because you made a mistake. Some of us have been here for decades without any issues. Sarah felt all eyes in the room turn to her. This was the moment she had prepared for, yet her heart still raced. Taking a deep breath, she stepped away from her presentation slides and moved closer to her audience. You're right, Marcus, I did make a mistake, a big one. And you're also right that many of you have years of excellent service under your belts. That's exactly why I need your help. She paused, letting her words sink in. This isn't about me teaching you. It's about us learning together how to make the Grand Plaza an even more exceptional place. Victoria, sitting quietly in the corner, nodded approvingly as Sarah continued. Each of you has experiences, insights, and stories that could help prevent someone else from making similar mistakes. This program isn't just about avoiding prejudice. It's about elevating our entire approach to hospitality. Jessica, who had become Sarah's unofficial ally, spoke up. I've been here 8 years, and I can think of at least a dozen situations where this kind of training would have helped me serve our guests better. The tension in the room began to shift. Several other staff members nodded in agreement, some sharing quick glances that suggested they too had stories to tell. What exactly would this training involve? Asked Maria Torres, the head of housekeeping, her interest clearly piqued. Sarah clicked to her next slide, revealing a comprehensive program structure. We'll start with interactive workshops that combine real-world scenarios with cultural awareness training. But here's the exciting part. We're not just going to talk about these situations, we're going to live them. She outlined her plan for role-playing exercises, cultural exchange days, and guest speaker sessions. The program would also include regular feedback sessions where staff could share their experiences and challenges openly. And Mr. Al-Rashid has personally approved bringing in experts from different cultural backgrounds to help us understand various traditions, customs, and expectations, Sarah added, watching as this detail captured everyone's attention. As the meeting progressed, Sarah could see the initial resistance beginning to crack. Even Marcus seemed less skeptical as she described the professional development opportunities the program would offer. After the presentation, Victoria approached her with a subtle smile. You handled that beautifully, she said, especially the pushback from Marcus. He's actually one of our best employees when he believes in something. Sarah gathered her materials, feeling a mix of relief and excitement. I just hope I can live up to their expectations now. You've already exceeded mine, came a familiar voice. Khalid had slipped quietly into the back of the room during the presentation. I particularly appreciated how you turned potential opposition into an opportunity for collaboration. Sarah felt a flush of pride at his words, but before she could respond, her phone buzzed with an urgent message. A popular travel blogger who had witnessed her interaction with Khalid weeks ago had just posted about the incident online. The post was already gaining traction, with comments flooding in from around the world. Mr. Al-Rashid, Sarah said, her voice tight with concern as she showed him the post. This could damage the Grand Plaza's reputation. Khalid studied the post thoughtfully, then surprised her with a smile. Or it could be exactly what we need to demonstrate our commitment to change. The question is, Ms. Bennett, how will you use this unexpected publicity to support your mission? Sarah looked at the growing number of comments, her mind already racing with possibilities. This public attention, though initially unwelcome, could become a powerful tool for promoting the very values she was working to instill. As she began formulating a response strategy, she realized that her program was about to face its first real test, and the whole world would be watching. The travel blog post spread like wildfire across social media platforms. By the next morning, the Grand Plaza incident was trending, with opinions divided between criticism of Sarah's initial behavior and praise for the hotel's innovative response to the situation. "Look at this," Jessica said, scrolling through her phone during their morning coffee meeting. "Major hotel chain shows how to turn prejudice into progress. They're calling it a masterclass in corporate responsibility." Sarah set down her coffee cup, her expression thoughtful. But for every positive comment, there's someone questioning whether we're serious about change or just doing damage control. "Then let's show them how serious we are," Victoria suggested, joining their table unexpectedly. She placed a tablet in front of Sarah, displaying an email from a major hospitality industry publication. "They want to do a feature story on our Dignity initiative. This is your chance to shape the narrative." Sarah spent the next hour in her office drafting a response, carefully outlining how her personal failure had sparked a meaningful transformation in the Grand Plaza's approach to hospitality. As she wrote, an idea began to form, one that was both terrifying and exciting. Later that afternoon, she knocked on Khalid's office door with a proposal that would either prove brilliant or disastrous. "You want to invite the press to observe our training sessions," Khalid repeated, making sure he had understood correctly. "Not just observe," Sarah clarified, her voice growing more confident as she explained. "I want to make our journey transparent, show the world that we're not just paying lip service to change, we're doing the hard work of creating it." Khalid leaned back in his chair, considering the idea. "It's risky, showing our vulnerabilities, our learning process." "Exactly," Sarah interjected, then caught herself. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt." But Khalid was smiling. "No, please continue. Your passion for this project is exactly why I chose you to lead it." "We have nothing to hide," Sarah continued. "Our mistakes, our struggles, our breakthroughs, they're all part of the story. By sharing them openly, we show others in the industry that real change is possible, but it requires honesty and commitment." The next few days became a whirlwind of activity. Sarah worked with the hotel's PR team to coordinate media coverage while simultaneously launching the first phase of staff training. The pressure was intense, but she found unexpected support from every corner of the hotel. Even Marcus had become an engaged participant. During one particularly powerful training session, a housekeeping staff member from Ethiopia shared her experience of being mistaken for a guest's personal maid. Instead of anger, she expressed how the incident had made her feel invisible. The room fell silent as her words sank in, and Sarah watched as her colleagues' expressions shifted from discomfort to understanding. "This is what we need to capture," Sarah told the documentary crew that had been quietly filming the session. "These real human moments of revelation and growth." The media coverage began to shift from sensationalized headlines about the initial incident to thoughtful pieces about organizational change and cultural transformation. Industry experts started reaching out, interested in learning more about the Grand Plaza's approach. One evening, as Sarah was reviewing feedback from the day's training sessions, she received an unexpected visit from Marcus. "I owe you an apology," he said, standing in her office doorway. "I thought this program was just about pointing fingers, making us feel guilty. But it's not, is it? It's about making us better at what we do." Sarah gestured for him to take a seat. "That's exactly what it's about. And I learn something new from everyone who shares their experiences." Marcus nodded, thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about some situations from my own career, times when I could have done better. Would you be interested in having me share those in the next session?" Before Sarah could respond, her phone lit up with another notification. This time, it was a message from a competing hotel chain. requesting information about implementing a similar program in their properties. Sarah looked up at Marcus, then back at her phone, a slow smile spreading across her face. What had started as a personal journey of redemption was becoming something much bigger, a movement that could potentially transform the entire industry's approach to hospitality and human dignity. As she began drafting a response to the request, Sarah realized that every challenge they faced, every story they shared, and every mistake they acknowledged was contributing to something extraordinary. The spotlight that had initially seemed threatening had become a beacon, drawing others toward a new vision of what luxury hospitality could be. As the Dignity Initiative gained momentum, Sarah found herself spending more time with Khalid, reviewing progress and discussing future plans. During one such meeting, she noticed something she hadn't before, a subtle sadness that crossed his face whenever they discussed personal experiences with prejudice. They were sitting in his private office, reviewing feedback from the latest training session, when Sarah finally gathered the courage to ask, "Mr. Al-Rashid, may I ask you something personal? What made you so passionate about this particular aspect of hospitality?" Khalid was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing the pattern on his coffee cup. "Have you ever heard of the Al-Rashid Hotel in Dubai?" he asked finally. Sarah shook her head and Khalid smiled softly. "It was my father's first hotel. Not nearly as grand as this one, just a modest establishment in the old part of the city. But it had something special." He stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the Manhattan skyline. "My father believed that true hospitality was about making every guest feel like family. He would personally greet everyone who walked through those doors, from wealthy sheikhs to backpacking students." Sarah listened intently as Khalid continued. "When I was younger, just starting to travel internationally for our family business, I experienced numerous instances of prejudice. Despite wearing expensive suits and carrying the right credentials, I was often treated with suspicion or disdain." He turned back to face her. "But one experience changed everything. I was in London negotiating our first international hotel acquisition. The seller, an old-school hotelier, refused to believe I was the buyer. He assumed I was just a junior representative, even after I showed him my credentials." "What did you do?" Sarah asked, completely absorbed in his story. "I bought his hotel chain," Khalid replied with a slight smile. "But more importantly, I learned something valuable from that experience. I realized that changing perceptions requires more than just proving people wrong. It requires creating environments where such prejudices can't take root in the first place." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out an old photograph. It showed a much younger Khalid, standing beside an older man in front of a modest but welcoming hotel entrance. "My father taught me that hospitality is about seeing the humanity in every person who walks through your doors. When he passed, I promised to expand that vision globally." Sarah studied the photograph, noticing the warm smiles and the simple elegance of the old hotel. "Is that why you sometimes dress traditionally when visiting your properties?" "Yes," Khalid nodded. "It's both a tribute to my heritage and a test of character for the properties and the people who run them. But it's more than that. It's a reminder that true luxury isn't about appearances or preconceptions. It's about how we make people feel." Their conversation was interrupted by Victoria, who entered with exciting news. "The guest satisfaction scores for this quarter are in," she announced, handing them both copies of the report. "We've seen a 15% increase in positive feedback, with specific mentions of staff cultural awareness and personalized service." Sarah scanned the numbers, her heart swelling with pride. But it was the comments section that really caught her attention. Guests from diverse backgrounds had written about feeling truly welcomed, understood and respected. "There's more," Victoria continued. "The International Hospitality Association wants to feature the Dignity Initiative as a case study in their annual conference. They're calling it a revolutionary approach to luxury hospitality training." Khalid's eyes lit up. "Perfect timing. I've been thinking about expanding the program to all our properties globally." Sarah looked up from the report, surprised. "Globally? But that would mean that we need to adapt the program for different cultural contexts while maintaining its core principles." Khalid completed her thought. "And I want you to lead that expansion." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. Me? But I've only been running the program here for a few months, and in those months, you've transformed not just this hotel's approach to hospitality, but you've started a conversation that's reaching far beyond these walls. Khalid gestured to the growing pile of press coverage and industry recognition on his desk. Your personal journey from that first day to now, that's exactly the kind of transformation we need to inspire in others. As Sarah absorbed this new development, she realized that what had started as a personal redemption story was evolving into something far more significant. The principles she had learned from her mistake and from Khalid's wisdom were about to reach a global audience, but with that expanded reach would come new challenges, cultural sensitivities, and resistances to overcome. The news of the program's global expansion spread quickly through the Grand Plaza, generating both excitement and anxiety. Sarah's office became a hub of activity as she worked to adapt the training materials for different cultural contexts while maintaining the program's core message of dignity and respect. Have you seen this? Jessica rushed into Sarah's office one morning, tablet in hand. She pulled up an article from a prominent business magazine, The Grand Plaza Effect, How One Hotel's Cultural Revolution is Reshaping Luxury Hospitality. Sarah skimmed the article, her eyes widening at the implications. The piece wasn't just about their program. It was about a fundamental shift in how the industry viewed luxury service, but with increased attention came increased scrutiny. Ms. Bennett, her assistant interrupted, there's a situation in the lobby you should know about. Sarah hurried downstairs to find a group of executives from a rival hotel chain conducting what appeared to be an undercover evaluation. They were posing as guests while secretly taking notes on staff interactions. It was a clear attempt to decode the success of the Dignity Initiative. Instead of panicking, Sarah approached them directly. "Welcome to the Grand Plaza," she said warmly. "I'm Sarah Bennett, head of our cultural training program. If you're interested in our approach to hospitality, I'd be happy to give you a proper tour." The executives exchanged surprised looks, caught off guard by her directness and generosity. This moment of authentic interaction perfectly exemplified the principles she had been teaching. Later that day, during a video conference with managers from Khalid's other hotels around the world, the true complexity of their task became apparent. What works in New York may not work in Singapore, argued the manager of their Asian flagship, Property. Our cultural norms around service and respect are very different. That's exactly why we need your input, Sarah responded, her confidence growing with each challenge. The program isn't about imposing one way of thinking, it's about finding universal principles of human dignity that transcend cultural boundaries. The discussion continued for hours, with managers from Dubai, London, Tokyo, and other locations sharing their perspectives. Sarah took careful notes, realizing that each challenge they raised was actually an opportunity to enrich the program. As she worked late into the evening, adapting the training materials, she received an unexpected visit from Marcus, the once skeptical concierge who had become one of the program's strongest advocates. "You know what really convinced me about this program?" he said, setting down a cup of coffee on her desk. "It wasn't the fancy presentations or the improved metrics. It was watching how it changed people, including me." Sarah looked up from her work, intrigued. "How so?" "Last week I had a guest who reminded me of my own grandfather, traditional, set in his ways. In the past, I might have made assumptions about his preferences. Instead, I asked questions, listened to his stories. Turns out he was a retired professor who loved avant-garde art. We had the most fascinating conversation about contemporary exhibitions." Their discussion was interrupted by an urgent email from Victoria. The International Hospitality Association wanted to move up their case study presentation. They would be arriving next week to document the program in action. "They want authenticity," Victoria wrote. "They want to see real training sessions, real interactions, real challenges." Sarah sat back in her chair, considering the implications. This would be their biggest test yet, allowing industry leaders to see not just their successes, but their struggles and ongoing learning process. "You know what?" Marcus said, reading the concern on her face. Show them everything. Show them how we handle difficult situations. Show them how we learn from our mistakes. That's what makes this program different. It's real. As Sarah began preparing for the association's visit, she reflected on how far they'd come. The program had evolved from a simple training initiative into a movement that was challenging industry standards and changing lives. But with their growing influence came growing responsibility. Each new hotel that adopted their principles, each new cultural context they entered, represented both a challenge and an opportunity to prove that dignity and respect truly were universal languages. Looking at the world map on her wall, now dotted with pins representing all the properties planning to implement the program, Sarah felt the weight of their mission. They weren't just changing a single hotel anymore. They were working to transform an entire industry's understanding of what true hospitality meant. The day the International Hospitality Association's evaluation team arrived coincided with an unexpected visit that would put everything Sarah and her team had built to the ultimate test. The morning began with Sarah briefing her staff, her voice steady despite her nerves. "Remember, we're not putting on a show for the evaluators. We're simply doing what we do every day, treating each person who walks through our doors with genuine respect and dignity." The evaluation team, led by Dr. Eleanor Wright, a renowned hospitality industry expert, had barely settled into their observation positions when a large group of traditionally dressed Middle Eastern guests entered the lobby. Among them was Hassan Al-Farsi, one of the most influential ambassadors in the diplomatic community, and, as Sarah would soon learn, a close personal friend of Khalid. Marcus, who was working the concierge desk, immediately noticed a subtle tension among some guests in the lobby. A few were visibly uncomfortable with the large group of traditionally dressed visitors, while others seemed unsure how to react. Without missing a beat, Marcus stepped forward. "Welcome to the Grand Plaza." He greeted them warmly in both English and Arabic, a skill he had acquired through the cultural awareness sessions of the Dignity Initiative. The ambassador's face lit up with pleasant surprise. Sarah watched from nearby, her heart swelling with pride as she saw the program's principles in action. Every staff member moved with purpose and respect, creating an atmosphere of genuine welcome that transcended cultural boundaries. Dr. Wright scribbled notes furiously, particularly interested in how the staff handled the mixed reactions from other guests. Some of these guests, initially showing discomfort, began to relax as they observed the natural and dignified interactions between the staff and the ambassadors group. "Remarkable," Dr. Wright whispered to her colleagues. "They're not just managing the immediate interactions, they're actively transforming the atmosphere of the entire space." The situation became even more interesting when Ambassador Al-Farsi approached the front desk with a complex set of requests, including specific dietary requirements and prayer room accommodations for his group. Sarah watched as Jessica handled each request with knowledge and sensitivity, demonstrating the depth of cultural understanding that had become standard practice at the Grand Plaza. "Ms. Bennett," Victoria called softly, appearing at her side. "Mr. Al-Rashid is on his way. He heard about the ambassador's visit and wants to ensure everything is perfect." Before Sarah could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught everyone's attention. A guest, who had clearly had too much to drink despite the early hour, was loudly complaining about the presence of the ambassador's group. The entire lobby seemed to freeze. Dr. Wright and her team leaned forward, pens poised, clearly seeing this as the ultimate test of the hotel's new principles. The ambassador's security detail tensed, but Ambassador Al-Farsi himself remained calm, watching with interest to see how the situation would be handled. Sarah moved to intervene, but Marcus was already there. He approached the agitated guest with calm confidence, speaking in low, respectful tones. "Sir, would you allow me to assist you to our private lounge? I believe you'll find it more comfortable, and I'd love to share with you a fascinating story about cultural diplomacy that changed my own perspective not too long ago." The guest, caught off guard by Marcus's genuine and dignified approach, allowed himself to be led away from the situation. As they walked, Marcus could be heard engaging him in genuine conversation, transforming a potential crisis into a learning opportunity. Ambassador Al-Farsi turned to Sarah, who had moved closer to ensure the situation remained under control. Most establishments would have simply removed the troubled guest, he observed. But your staff chose to engage with dignity and attempt to create understanding. This is unexpected and impressive. This is exactly what we've been working toward, Sarah explained, her voice filled with quiet pride. Every challenging moment is an opportunity to demonstrate and spread our message of universal respect. Dr. Wright approached them, her professional demeanor barely containing her excitement. Ms. Bennett, would you mind if I recorded that last interaction as a case study? It's a perfect example of practical application of cultural sensitivity training. Before Sarah could answer, she noticed Khalid had entered the lobby, dressed in his traditional clothing. He stood quietly observing the scene before him, and Sarah could swear she saw tears in his eyes as he watched his vision of true hospitality being realized in ways even he hadn't imagined. The aftermath of the ambassador's visit created waves throughout the hospitality industry. Dr. Wright's evaluation report wasn't just positive, it was revolutionary. The International Hospitality Association published a feature article declaring the Grand Plaza's Dignity Initiative as a new gold standard in luxury service. Sarah sat in her office, reading through the report with Jessica and Marcus. The program demonstrates that true luxury is not about gilded surfaces or premium amenities, Dr. Wright had written, but about creating an environment where every human being feels valued and understood. You know what's really amazing? Marcus said, looking up from the report. Yesterday, that guest from the lobby incident came back to apologize. We ended up having a 2-hour conversation about his own travels in the Middle East 20 years ago. He's actually registered for our public cultural awareness seminar next month. Jessica smiled. That's what I love about this program. It doesn't just prevent problems, it transforms people. Their discussion was interrupted by Victoria, who burst into the office with excitement. You need to see this. She pulled up a video on her tablet. It was a news report featuring interviews with guests from around the world who had stayed at the Grand Plaza since the implementation of the Dignity Initiative. A Japanese business executive spoke about feeling truly understood when the staff recognized and respected his cultural practices without him having to explain them. A Brazilian family praised the way their children were treated with the same respect as adult guests. An elderly couple from India shared how touched they were when the kitchen staff prepared traditional dishes from their region for their anniversary celebration. But wait, there's more, Victoria said, switching to another screen. Other hotel chains are reaching out. They want to know if we can help them implement similar programs. The Dignity Initiative is becoming a movement. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they had created. What had started as her personal journey of redemption had grown into something that was changing the entire industry's approach to hospitality. Later that day, Khalid called a special meeting in the Grand Ballroom. The entire staff gathered along with Ambassador Al-Farsi and several industry leaders who had flown in specifically for the occasion. When I first acquired the Grand Plaza, Khalid began, his voice carrying across the hushed room, I had a vision of creating a place where true hospitality transcended cultural boundaries. But what has been achieved here has exceeded even my highest hopes. He gestured for Sarah to join him at the podium. As she walked forward, she caught glimpses of familiar faces in the crowd, the housekeeping staff who had shared their stories, the bellhops who had embraced learning new languages, the kitchen staff who had eagerly expanded their cultural cuisine knowledge. Ms. Bennett's journey, Khalid continued, from that first day at the reception desk to leading this revolutionary program, embodies everything the Dignity Initiative represents. It shows us that when we have the courage to face our biases and the determination to learn from them, we can create lasting positive change. Ambassador Al-Farsi stepped forward next. What I witnessed here yesterday was more than just excellent service. It was a model for how people from different cultures can interact with mutual respect and understanding. In my diplomatic work, I've seen how small moments of genuine connection can bridge the largest divides. Sarah listened to their words, remembering the young woman who had stood nervously in front of the Grand Plaza just months ago, full of prejudices she didn't even recognize. That version of herself seemed like a stranger now. As she looked out at the assembled crowd, she saw not just colleagues, but partners in a mission that had become larger than any of them. The ripples of their work were spreading far beyond the walls of the Grand Plaza, touching lives and changing perspectives across the globe. Victoria caught her eye from the crowd and gave her a subtle thumbs up. In that moment, Sarah realized that while their journey had already achieved so much, in many ways it was just beginning. The real test would be ensuring that these changes became permanent, that the principles they had established would continue to grow and evolve. Ambassador Al-Farsi's voice brought her attention back to the present. "I believe," he was saying, "that what has been created here is not just a training program, but a blueprint for how we can build a more understanding and respectful world, one interaction at a time." 1 year after the fateful day when Sarah first met Khalid, the Grand Plaza's lobby was transformed for a very special event. Representatives from luxury hotels across 6 continents had gathered for the first Global Hospitality Dignity Summit, an initiative that had grown from the seeds planted in that very lobby. Sarah stood at the reception desk, now a place of profound meaning for her, watching as delegates arrived from around the world. Each name tag represented a different country, a different culture, but all were united by a common purpose: learning how to transform their approach to hospitality through the principles of dignity and respect. "It feels surreal, doesn't it?" Jessica appeared beside her, now the head of staff training for all of Khalid's North American properties. "To think this all started with one mistake and one person willing to give a second chance." Sarah nodded, remembering that morning with crystal clarity. "Sometimes the biggest transformations come from our most humbling moments," she said, echoing Khalid's words from so long ago. The summit's opening ceremony was scheduled to begin in the grand ballroom, but Sarah had one important task to complete first. She had arranged for a special training session with a group of new recruits, their first exposure to the Dignity Initiative. "Before we go upstairs to join the summit," she told the nervous-looking group, "I want to share a story with you. It's about a young woman who thought she knew everything about luxury hospitality, until one day she realized she had missed its most fundamental principle." As she recounted her experience with Khalid, Sarah could see understanding dawn in their eyes. She wasn't just telling them about the importance of treating everyone with respect. She was showing them through her own vulnerability and growth. "Now," she said, leading them to the front desk, "I want each of you to stand here where I stood that day. Feel what it's like to be the first person a guest sees when they enter our hotel. Remember that each person who walks through those doors carries their own story, their own dignity and their own worth." Upstairs, the ballroom was filling with industry leaders, cultural experts, and hotel staff from around the world. The walls were adorned with photographs showing moments of genuine connection between staff and guests from diverse backgrounds, each image telling a story of transformation. Victoria, now the global director of operations for Khalid's hotel group, took the stage to open the summit. "1 year ago, we embarked on a journey that would challenge everything we thought we knew about luxury hospitality. Today, we gather not just to celebrate our successes, but to commit ourselves to continuing this vital work." Marcus, who had become one of the program's most passionate advocates, led a panel discussion about real-world implementation of the Dignity Initiative's principles. His personal story of transformation from skeptic to believer resonated deeply with the audience. During the lunch break, Sarah found herself speaking with a young hotel manager from Singapore who had flown in specifically to learn about the program. "We've been following your journey closely," she said. "The way you turned a personal mistake into a catalyst for industry-wide change, it's inspired us to look more deeply at our own practices." As the afternoon sessions began, Khalid approached Sarah with a document in his hand. "Do you remember when I told you that my father believed true hospitality was about making every guest feel like family?" he asked. Sarah nodded, recalling their conversation from months ago. "Well, I found something in his old papers that I think you should see." He handed her a faded notebook, its pages filled with handwritten observations about guest interactions from decades ago. He was developing his own version of what would become the Dignity Initiative, but he never had the chance to implement it fully. Sarah carefully turned the pages, seeing her own principles reflected in the careful notes of a man who had understood the true meaning of hospitality long before she was born. "Your father would be proud," she said softly, "of how you've carried his vision forward." Khalid smiled, his eyes bright with emotion. "He would be proud of all of us, of how we've taken that vision and turned it into a movement that's changing. Not just how we treat our guests, but how we understand and respect each other as human beings." As the Global Hospitality Dignity Summit drew to a close, Sarah found herself back in the lobby of the Grand Plaza, watching the sunset paint the marble floors in shades of gold. The same space where her journey had begun now stood as a testament to the power of transformation. A group of summit delegates was gathering for one final tour of the hotel, eager to see the practical implementation of the principles they'd been discussing. Sarah smiled as she watched Marcus lead them through the lobby, pointing out specific locations where memorable moments of cultural connection had occurred. "And right here," he was saying, gesturing to the front desk, "is where it all began, where one moment of prejudice became the catalyst for a revolution in hospitality." Victoria joined Sarah, watching the tour group. "You know what the most beautiful part is," she said softly. "Every person who walks through those doors now becomes part of our story, part of our ongoing journey of learning and growth." The summit had exceeded all expectations, with hotels and resorts from around the world committing to implementing their own versions of the Dignity Initiative. But more than just the professional success, it was the personal transformations that moved Sarah the most. She thought about all the stories she'd heard over the past few days. The room service attendant from Tokyo, who had learned to read guests' cultural cues to provide more personalized service. The concierge in Dubai, who had created a cultural exchange program with local communities. The housekeeping supervisor in London, who had initiated language classes for her staff. Jessica approached with a tablet in hand. "You need to see this," she said, pulling up a series of social media posts. Guests from hotels around the world were sharing their experiences with the newly implemented dignity programs, each story a testament to the ripple effect of their work. "It's amazing," Sarah said, scrolling through the posts. "Each of these interactions, these moments of understanding, they're creating connections that go far beyond the walls of any hotel." As the evening drew to a close, Khalid gathered the remaining summit participants in the grand lobby for a final address, but instead of taking the spotlight himself, he gestured for Sarah to speak. Standing before the assembled group, Sarah took a moment to look around the lobby, at the place where her journey had begun, at the faces of colleagues who had become family, at the space that had transformed from a workplace into a beacon of change. "When I first stood behind that desk," she began, her voice clear and strong, "I thought I knew what luxury hospitality meant. I thought it was about perfect service, about maintaining an image of exclusivity. But I've learned that true luxury is about something far more precious. It's about recognizing and honoring the dignity in every person we meet." She continued, sharing not just her story, but the collective journey they had all undertaken. "This lobby has become more than just the entrance to a hotel. It's become a gateway to understanding, a space where prejudices dissolve and connections flourish. Each of you will return to your own hotels, carrying these principles with you. But remember, this isn't about creating a perfect system. It's about fostering an environment where every mistake becomes an opportunity for growth, where every interaction carries the potential for transformation." As she concluded her speech, Khalid stepped forward with an announcement that brought their journey full circle. "Today, I'm proud to announce the establishment of the Global Dignity and Hospitality Foundation. This organization will provide resources and support for hotels worldwide to implement these principles, ensuring that what began in this lobby continues to grow and evolve." The applause that followed was more than just a celebration of their achievements. It was a commitment to carrying this legacy forward. As the crowd dispersed, Sarah remained in the lobby, watching as the last rays of sunlight filtered through the windows. A young woman in a newly pressed uniform caught her eye, a new recruit preparing for her first day at the front desk. Sarah approached her with a warm smile, remembering her own first day. "Remember," she said gently, Every person who walks through those doors carries their own story. Our job isn't just to provide a service, it's to recognize and honor the dignity in each of those stories. The young woman nodded, her eyes bright with understanding. And in that moment, Sarah knew that their work would continue, that the legacy they had built would live on through each new person who joined their journey, through each interaction that transformed prejudice into understanding, through each moment that proved that true luxury lies not in appearances or assumptions, but in the simple act of treating every human being with dignity and respect.